Welcome, friends, to Walk With Me Ministries. I'm Pastor Mark Horn, the pastor of Andrews Presbyterian Church in Andrews, South Carolina, and we are glad you joined us. Today I want to talk with you about the incident that happened this weekend that occurred in Memphis, the murder of Tyre Nichols at the hand of the police. Five police officers pulled Tyre over and then proceeded to drag him from his car and to beat him to death. And it's taken the country by storm. Here we have another brutal death of a young man at the hands of police brutality, which is off of the chart. And with the circumstance, the narrative has switched. As we've seen in past years, the police brutality has stemmed, or the narrative of the story has primarily been white police officers taking advantage and murdering black men. Profiling is a word that's often tossed, even when other men of other ethnicities are involved than a white police officer. Still, the narrative is that one white police officer influenced the others, and it's just been prevalent. However, with this situation, what's prevalent is that all of the police officers involved were of African American descent, and so was Mr. Nichols. So the narrative of race, it being a race hate, has flipped for the most part. There is an issue, an argument that can be made that this isn't a matter of racial profiling. Now, there are some who push the narrative. I've seen some reports of CNN anchorman Don Lemon. I have read Reverend Jamar Tisby's tweets that it doesn't matter, that they basically said it doesn't matter that these were all black men, that it is the attitude of white supremacy which has infiltrated into all five of these black police officers. It is the systemic system of white supremacy that is hurting these young men. Well, there's something that we can agree on. There is a systemic system that is hurting these young black men, but it isn't white supremacy. It is the system of total depravity. When we look at a situation like this, one of the things that we must do is analyze it from a biblical perspective. We must see the whole situation from the lens of God's Word. And what we learn in this situation is that sin has played a major part in this young man, Mr. Nichols' death. Since this is played out, his autopsy this is all reported from the New York Times. Rick Rojas published this report actually yesterday, January 28th at 1:51 p.m. So as of that report, the autopsy showed that indeed Mr. Nichols died from trauma due to being struck. In fact, the report goes, and some of you may have, I've watched the video, some of you may have watched the video as well. It is not pretty. It's a very difficult video to watch. But he's kicked, he's struck, he's sprayed with pepper spray. At one point, he screams out for his mom 3 times. He is rushed to the hospital in critical condition and died 3 days later. The officers, of course, are fired, and the internal investigation renders them totally at fault for this young man's death. And not only did they do the things that are seen on the video, but they are held accountable, are being held accountable for things that they did not do, which is to provide the service of aid. They didn't offer any kind of aid for this young man, and that is, as the report states, required by the police department. So here we have another young man who has passed away. He's passed away at the hands of policemen who have taken their authority too far. And that really boils down to what I wanted to discuss today, because I'm not sure, I haven't read as to why Mr. Nichols was pulled over. I don't understand the circumstances behind these policemen pulling him from the car like they did, like I've witnessed on the video, and continued to pummel this young man to death, his eventual death. But what we have is a failure to recognize a human being made in the image of God. What we have is a failure for policemen and really public in general of understanding the value and the worth of a human life. Now, I know that the report states that this was a special unit they called Scorpion Unit. They have a special purpose in going into the toughest and most fearsome parts of the city of Memphis and taking on crime from that standpoint. But no matter what, no matter how difficult the situation that you find yourself in, one of the things that you must do is to view that other person in light of God's Word. And you must view that person in light of the fact they are created in God's image. If they're a criminal, then they're a criminal. If they're a thief, they're a thief. If they're a liar, they're a liar. If they've, whatever the Ten Commandments lays out, whatever law that they've broken, then they have consequences to deal with because of that. But it doesn't take away the human dignity. If the consequences eventually renders itself in the future after a trial and the judgment is set that that person has done something so heinous to where a death penalty is in order, then so be it. But it isn't and never has been given over to the police force to be judge and executioner. Genesis 1:27 reminds us especially of this fact. When God in the creation of mankind states that, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And so when we see another person, and we're not even talking about whether they're a Christian or not. We're not talking about Christian to Christian or Christian to non-Christian or non-Christian to Christian. But we're talking about a person who may or may not have done something really bad, but wasn't viewed as a person. They were viewed as someone who didn't do what these 5 police officers thought he should have done. And so they took it upon themselves to punish him. One of the non-actions of this group was that they didn't provide aid per department policy to Mr. Nichols after they had hurt him really bad. And this really brings in 1 John 3:17 as well. If anyone has the world's goods and see his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Well, obviously the answer to John's question is that God's love isn't abiding in them. These 5 men did not exhibit any kind of love towards this person. In fact, they exhibited the complete opposite. And so what we understand is that as we are created in the image of God, there is a certain aspect of us that we need to sustain from bringing any kind of physical harm and hurt, even spiritual harm or hurt, to another human being to such an extent that Mr. Nichols experienced. And we have to realize that, and we as a church need to do better at teaching that people created in the image of God has certain aspects to them. They have, as our Westminster Confession states, Confession chapter 4.2, Westminster Confession chapter 4 and second part tells us that God has made all of the creatures. He has created them male and female. He has created them in His image. How? That they have immortal souls, that they have knowledge. They are endued with knowledge. They are endued with righteousness and true holiness after His own image. They are made after His image in such a way that they should be treated with such dignity. And so the protesters came out and they wanted the Scorpion reserves disbanded from the police department, and they got their wish. Now, I don't know if that's good or bad. From the way I understand the report, that's probably a good thing, because these groups have taken their duties to the nth degree, to the extreme. But I want us to really put our hearts and our minds to pray for this situation, and not for just this one, but for this situation in our country. I think what we understand is that the system itself needs improvement. We see that the system itself is not bringing into the workplace of these policemen, not all of them, but certain ones, of how they deal with the public. And this application is really made to all other aspects of life. You made this application even for the teacher. The teacher who goes into a classroom and looks at her students needs to look at her students with dignity. Those are living, breathing souls that are before them. They are those that, by God's grace, is who they are. And so, as we close out today, I just want to really express my heartache over this, because I know there are a lot of people who really blame the system that are even now, even though a white person wasn't involved in this incident, are blaming white people. And there are those who are blaming Mr. Nichols. Why didn't he comply? What he had, I know of even read someone said that he had to have done something. They wouldn't just, yes, they would. Why? Because the human heart is depraved. It could have happened. And from the way it seems, it did happen that way. And so we need, as a church, and particularly for me as a preacher, and I even say for other people who step into the pulpit or to a podium, maybe as a Sunday school teacher or a youth worker or a small group Bible study leader. We really need to emphasize the importance of marriage, of husband and father in the home, of raising our children to understand that those other people, those homeless people, those people that may not look like us, those that may have even broken curfew, whatever circumstance, whatever situation that you are thinking of, we need to be teaching and preaching the importance of families staying together, of fathers being in the home, of fathers raising their sons to have a heart towards those who are hurting, towards those who are even in trouble, that we are in service to them. And our goal should be that of helping them out of the situation that they find themselves in, instead of making it worse. Instead of making it worse for them and for their families. Now, Mr. Nichols' family has to pick up pieces left behind because of what these 5 police officers did. Now, these families of these 5 police officers have to pick up pieces and deal with the decision that their son or their father or their spouse made, maybe in even the heat of the moment. Christian, we must spend time in prayer for our country, for our culture, for our people. No matter what race, creed, or nationality, no matter what ethnicity, that God's common grace extends to all. His common grace extends to all, for the Jew and even for the Greek. So until next time, I pray the Lord will keep you, that His face will shine upon you, and He will be gracious to you. See you.